So with that, would you please welcome our first presenter of the night, bringing us a talk, Hospitality in a Polarized World.
So I just got married about 5 months ago, and yeah, that'll take a nice shout out. When my husband and I were just starting to get to know each other, we were in the awkward, not quite dating phase. I took him hiking up a big mountain to see if he could hang with me in the woods. And so we're climbing up this mountain, and we're getting to know each other, and he's telling me that he used to be a Marine Corps. For 7 years, he was an officer, and he then asked me if I would ever join the military. And I said, no, I'm a pacifist. And that was pretty much the end of that conversation, and we moved on, and we kept hiking up and getting to know each other for the next couple months. And fast forward a year and a half, we're walking down the aisle together and committing ourselves in marriage. And just about a month or two ago, he then tells me that he's thinking about joining the reserve chaplaincy. And we got to really talk through some of our differences in there. And for me, I was someone who kind of pretended like the military and war didn't exist. I was someone who kind of separated myself from that world, and I just hated thinking about killing and war. And yet I couldn't do that when this was my husband's future career choice. And so we sat down and we had a lot of deep heart-to-hearts, and I got to hear his stories and experiences that got him to where he was. And that really led me to reconsider my own understanding and the complexities to an issue that I thought was pretty straightforward. And we got to the place where I was actually able to bless him in the step that he's now taking to apply for the Army Reserve chaplaincy. But that wasn't easy, and it took me getting outside my own bubble, my own comfort zone, and engage with someone who is pretty different than me and really hear the story behind that. And we don't see that happening enough in our world today. Our world is deeply divided, and people are moving to the extremes. There's this polarization that's occurring. And as we have thought about this in our world, often there's these voices that are just becoming louder and louder, and we feel like we have to raise our voice and convince everyone else that we're the only voice worth listening to and demonize all the other perspectives. And often what happens as well is there's this multiplicity of choice, which results in us having to really just separate ourselves from people who think differently. On social media, if anyone says something you don't like, you can just instantly unfriend them. You'll never hear from them again. We can listen to different channels, read different newspapers, and this has resulted in increased separation, which actually has led to us harboring stereotypes within ourselves that need to be checked sometimes. And that doesn't happen unless we're in these spaces of collaboration. You see, this tendency to separate ourselves from one another isn't the way of Jesus. Jesus is one who actually moved towards people who were different from him and actually gave his life for their behalf. And I, as a Christian, I want to model the way of Jesus, and yet often I must admit that we as Christians have not done that well. Throughout the 2,000 years of our existence, churches have divided time and again to the point that there's an estimated 30,000 different denominations. And that has resulted in churches today that often even function as isolated, autonomous entities. Even within the same neighborhood, they share the same vision and values and goals, and yet never communicate with one another. And that's a problem for me. Not only that, but churches often demonize other people of similar faith. And as a Christian, my faith asks me to find the face of God in everyone I meet. So we espouse this message of reconciling love, and people wonder what this love is that we're all about. And that burden led me to found an organization in Boston called Unite Boston. So we're bringing together the Catholics and the Orthodox and the mainline Protestants and the evangelicals, Black, white, Hispanic, Pentecostals, everyone, creating a space for togetherness because we are better together and we can do more when we come together than if we stay separate. And what we're seeing as we do that is often these spaces are creating spaces where we can better understand ourselves and our relationships with one another. And so on our worship team, we have a whole bunch of different Christians, and I overheard some of them talking one evening, and I heard an evangelical woman speaking to a Catholic woman. And she said, "I never thought that Catholics were Christians until I met you, and I saw God in you as you worshiped, and that totally changed my perspective." See, that never would have happened unless there was that space to come together and learn about one another. However, you don't have to be a Christian to adopt a posture of hospitality in our polarized world. All it takes is moving towards those who are most different than you. And I want to encourage you to think about that one issue that just burns in your heart, the issue that just makes you want to go, change the world. What is that issue for you? And now, have you actually sat to listen to the story on the other side of that? Have you sat, not just a character on TV, not just a newspaper article, but a real life, maybe even across from the dinner table? Go to that place. I want to encourage you to get to know someone new. Have your own perspectives and ideas challenged. Because what I'm learning in the work I'm doing is we think that unity is compromise, where we have to come together and agree on a whole new place together. But I think at the heart of unity, especially adopting hospitality, is a way in which we can be together and still have our separate identities, and it speaks to the way we treat one another across our differences. So we have to create these spaces of intentional dialogue, and I think one of the best places we can do this is in our neighborhoods. Now, I know the New England way is to put our heads down and make our way to our destination, but I think there's another thing that we can do to care for the people around us and the place around us in the places where we live. And we've been doing this with Unite Boston. We've been creating neighborhood dinners. We have 11 different neighborhoods all around Greater Boston right now that are hosting meals, dialogue, shared conversation, and prayer, and talking about what can we do better together than working independently. And as we do this, we're finding that beneath this stoic New England faces, there's this deep desire for belonging and connection. I was at a gathering last month in Somerville, and there was 12 people who were all different Christians from different backgrounds. They lived within a couple blocks of one another, and they had never met one another before. And as they gathered for a meal and conversation at the end of the night, one of the women shouted out, "I love you guys!" And I feel like that speaks to both the power of a shared identity and faith in Christ, but also the deep desire and belonging that we all desire in our own neighborhoods and communities. So in this world, each of us are trying to make our own way. But my question is, what would it take for your way and my way to become our way? I started with a story about Andrew and I because I think at the end of the day, it comes down to interpersonal relationships. Every relationship can be a space where we work out what it means to choose unity over division and hospitality over hostility. It's not easy, but it takes a humble curiosity and a willingness to get behind the issues and finding the stories and values that people hold to get there. So while the world is full of walls and divisions and boundaries, I'm convinced if there's enough relationships and deep conversations to get beyond those walls, the walls will come tumbling down. So will you be one to go and to take a bridge and extend your hand of friendship across the wall? Thank you.